state of Israel has the right to continue existing.
What right are you talking about? Does Britain have a right to exist? Does the United States have a right to exist?
Aggression should not be condoned into countries.
The first thing that Israel did was take southern Lebanon, take someone else's country. And no one even mentions that. And so I guess I would be opposed to that because I think Lebanon has a right to exist. I thought Gaza had a right to exist. What do you think of Gaza?
What do I think of Gaza?
Yeah.
I think it is a disaster for the future of Israel, a disaster for the Palestinian people.
Why would you describe it first as a disaster for the future of Israel? You've got tens of thousands of civilians murdered, but it's foremost a disaster for the future of Israel. No, it's foremost a disaster for the families of the dead kids. But no one can say it because you have to be like, oh no, but really October 7th
I don't know what you're talking about, Gaza. We're having a...
Everyone watching this knows what I'm talking about.
Welcome back, people. Today we have a juicy, once-in-a-lifetime clash between the corporate media and an ex-employee who turned his back on it. Tucker Carlson, who worked in mainstream television for roughly 23 years, went head-to-head with Zanny Minton Beddoes, the editor-in-chief of The Economist, who's still a corporate shill after 32 years of servitude. What started off as a friendly thought exchange turned into a war of wits as soon as Tucker figured out that this is not a friendly interview but a trap set by Zanny to make him apologize for the anti-Semitism and blasphemy Tucker committed against her Zio gods. Let's start this with Zanny setting up the trap that unfortunately for her, Tucker did not walk into.
You have argued that this is a war at Israel's behest, and I think you've argued, if I've got this right, you made the point that Israel was doing this because it wanted the United States out of the region. Can you just talk me through that logic?
Well, let me just go to your first point. I wasn't arguing that the United States embarked on this at Israel's behest. I was noting it. And the Secretary of State has said that, the Speaker of the House has said that, the President of the United States has said it multiple times. Now, there's a kind of revisionism in progress where we say, well, we never said that. Well, you did say that, and it's on video.
Why you think Israel would want to do this so that the United States gets out of the Middle East?
The first thing you need to do in order to understand why people are doing something is to think about the world through their eyes. So let's just do that from the perspective of Israel for one moment. This is a nuclear-armed country, the only officially nuclear-armed country in the region that has an inherent drive to territorial expansion and for more resources. It doesn't make it different from any other country, Imperial Japan or any other country in a similar situation. This is an ascendant country with a leader who sees himself as a global leader, as he said last week. So what constrains them in that? Well, a couple of things, three things really. One, most obviously, is Iran, which is a counterbalance to Israeli power, right? And also a funder of all kinds of regional problems for them, and Hamas and Hezbollah and all the rest, the Houthis. So you got to do something about Iran. You need a new regime, or you probably just need to do what they have done in all these other countries, cause chaos. Two, the Gulf states. Of course, the GCC, the 6 Gulf monarchies, because they're the biggest investors in the United States and they're the producers of all this energy. You cannot, number one, allow them to unite in any kind of like Gulf NATO. And two, you have to reduce their power. You've got your own new gas field, so it's like, and you've got Azerbaijan, so it's like you don't need them. And three, you have to get the United States out because the United States has for 80 years constrained you. You're looking at me, this is like the most obvious thing I think I've ever said. You're looking at me like I'm speaking Swahili.
Do you really believe President Trump would be bullied or pushed into doing something he didn't want to do by Prime Minister Netanyahu?
I love how you've constrained the question. Let me tell you what I do know, and then you can characterize it as you wish. I don't fully understand the president's thinking, as I don't understand any other person's thinking fully. How could you? I can only tell you what I know to be true, which is in June, at the outset of the 12-day war, the Prime Minister of Israel called the White House on secure video conferencing into the Situation Room and said, we are moving this week against Iran's nuclear facilities. And by the end of the week, by Thursday, he had. And that was followed shortly after by U.S. backup, which was inevitable, right? Because we have a defense guarantee implied with Israel. And we also have a lot.
Was it inevitable? I mean, previous presidents have said no.
That's a very smart point. No, it was not inevitable. Once Israel began its attacks on Iran, then American involvement was, yes, inevitable.
But at the end of the 12 days, the president said, bring those jets back.
That
so President Trump has had agency over Prime Minister Netanyahu.
That is exactly what happened. Now, some of us argued this is preparatory to a much larger effort that will attempt to achieve what they sought to achieve the first time, which was regime change. And the president, I believe, was fully aware, and if you said it yourself, Israel wanted a different regime in Tehran, okay? Why wouldn't they? They had no plan for what that regime would be. That's a fact. I don't think they've claimed they had a plan. They just want chaos. They just don't want the people in charge. And if it breaks into a constellation of countries and devolves into a permanent ethnic civil war, that's fine with them. By the way, you can deal with the refugee crisis. Good luck. But that is all true what I've just said. Then we fast forward to this winter and several more trips to Washington by Benjamin Netanyahu. And once again, Benjamin Netanyahu said to the White House, we are going. Now, I happen to know this is true, but you don't need to take my word for it because the President of the United States said it. The Secretary of State said it. And then he went on to say, on camera, we have all these assets in the Gulf. There are hundreds of thousands of Americans in the region. We have all these military bases and we have energy. And then the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, also said it on camera. It's all available on the internet. And this just happened in the last 2 weeks.
But do you not think the President of the United States could have chosen to say, no, you're not?
And that is the question, and I cannot answer that question. But clearly,
but that's important because the argument argument that you are making is that somehow this was foisted on the United States.
I'm not making an argument.
You are. You've said this again and again.
Not. It's not an argument. It's an observation. I'm repeating what the President, the Secretary of State, and the Speaker of the House, the three most powerful people in the United States, have all said on camera.
But there are plenty of things that the President of the United States says that do not merit being taken at face value.
I don't understand. The President and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, have all said Israel was going first, and so we went in because we have critical interest in protecting Israel. We have a critical interest in the Gulf, and we have critical interest in our bases. I don't understand. What are we missing?
But this was a decision by the President of the United States.
It certainly was.
And the President of the United States could have made a different decision. And let me suggest to you that there are other reasons why the President of the United States made this. One might have been hubris after the success of the operation to remove.
I'm not sure what we're arguing about. I mean,
because the way you present this and the way it is presented by many people is that somehow a very powerful Israel and a very powerful Jewish and Israeli lobby is pushing policies in this administration that are against America's national interests.
I'm telling you what I saw and what the President and Attorney General, Secretary of State, and the Speaker have all said publicly, and what everyone who's followed this knows because it's all out there. Okay, it's public source. Israel said we're going to move, and the United States reacted by joining them and then engaging in a partnership, a military partnership. I think it's the first time it's happened since the Second World War. And there are all kinds of problems that come down from that. But you raised the correct question. That's not a slander. That's not anti-Semitism. That's what actually happened.
The gaslighting in corporate media is reaching an insane level because I cannot believe what I'm seeing right here. Whenever Tucker mentions a well-established fact or quotes someone from the Trump government implicating Israel in this war, Zanny responds with, "So your argument is..." What do you mean, your argument? He literally quoted government officials saying that Israel pushed us into this war. That's not an argument, that's a video-recorded fact that everyone saw with their own eyes. But I'm not the only one agitated by this. Tucker had enough of her everyone is to blame except Israel rhetoric and is going to flip the script on her until she starts stuttering. See for yourself.
You have made the argument very strongly that the United States has been pushed into something not in its own national interest by pressure from Israel and the lobbying power of Israel.
Well, it has been. The question is whether the person who makes the ultimate decision, who would be President Trump, should have pushed back. That's it. Of course, Trump should have pushed back.
As previous presidents have done.
To some extent, some very limited extent. George W. Bush didn't push back. We wound up in the Iraq War, and now everyone pretends, that had nothing to do with Israel. I was there. I was talking to Bush. That's not true. That's a lie. And that's why it's so important, from my perspective, to say out loud what is true before history is rewritten and disappears.
Very clear.
And it's lying that gets us here. Because we say, no, lobbying efforts had no effect. Really? We say that about our pharmaceutical policy? No. Everybody understands that every policy a large government makes, including ours, is influenced by various stakeholders who were affected by that policy. But this is the one area we have to be like, no, it It had nothing to do with the fact that his biggest donors were pushing him to do this, or the Bibi visited 7 times in 1 year. Are you joking? I'm not going to play along with the lies anymore.
We have both been critical of the Israeli government. I just want to kind of clarify terms a bit here.
Well, I've really been critical of the Israeli government.
I've been plenty critical of the Israeli government. I've told you at the beginning that we were against this war.
What do you think of Gaza?
What do I think of Gaza?
Yeah.
I think the war in Gaza, to start with, was a perfectly reasonable response in response to the horrors of October 7th. I think now the places, I mean, I've been there. Have you been to Gaza? I've been to Gaza since the war started.
They would not
it's
let
catastrophic.
me into Gaza. Trust me, very few journalists get into Gaza.
Yeah, no, I went with the IDF. It's the only way that you can go in, but nonetheless you go in and you see a flattened place. I think it is a disaster for the future of Israel, a disaster for the Palestinian people, a horror, 70,000 people dead.
Why would you describe it first as a disaster for the future of Israel? You've got tens of thousands of civilians murdered, but it's foremost a disaster for the future of Israel? No, it's foremost a disaster for the families of the dead kids.
Absolutely. I made 3 points.
Because everybody sucks up to Israel in this way that suggests they're afraid. And everyone is afraid, and you know that. Everyone's like, the real problem is calling people anti-Semites allows real anti-Semites to flourish. It's like, no, actually, the real problem with calling people anti-Semites who aren't is accusing the innocent of a crime they didn't commit. And the real crime in Gaza is killing people who did nothing wrong. So those are the real problems, I would say. But no one can say it because you have to be like, oh no, but really, October 7th
I don't know what you're talking about, Gaza. We're having a...
Everyone watching this knows what I'm talking about.
Do you believe in Israel's right to exist? Would you consider yourself a Zionist in that narrow definition?
What does that mean, a right to exist?
The existence of the political state of Israel as
but
it
has
existed,
a right. What does that mean?
That you think it should continue in its existence as a state right now. So you do not agree with Iran, for example.
Well, let me just ask, since you asked me the question, it's fair for me to get you to define the term so I can answer it. You've asked 2 questions. The first was, do you believe Israel has a right to exist? And the second question was, do you believe Israel should continue to go on as a nation state? And those are very different questions. So I often hear the phrase...
Having been created as a political entity in 1948,
does it have a right to exist? Is that what you're asking?
I don't want to get hung up on the right to
no,
should it continue to exist? That's how I define narrowly Zionism.
Because the phrase you used was devised by the Israeli government. Of course, does it have a right to exist? And so my question to you would be, what does that mean?
Why don't you answer my question? It's a very simple question.
I don't know what your question is. Are you asking, does it have a right to exist, or do I want it to exist? Do I seek its destruction?
Fine, answer it that way.
Well, of course I don't seek its destruction. I've already said, as you know, because I said it to you, I don't want Israel to be destroyed or have to use nuclear weapons.
We've established that you are in that narrow terms a Zionist. If that's how
I'm in no sense a Zionist. I don't want any country to be destroyed at all, and I don't want people to die, particularly ones who committed no crime, because I don't believe in killing innocents, period. That's the basis of Western civilization. Eastern civilization is a whole different view. They believe in collective punishment. I don't.
So you're in no sense a Zionist?
I don't even know what that means. Why don't you define the term, and then I'll tell you whether I am.
I've just defined it.
What's a Zionist?
That a Zionist, in my narrow term, this definition is that the state of Israel, the political state of Israel, has the right to continue existing.
The right? Where does that right come from? What do you mean? These are like, I'm not being a lawyer about it. I just want to know what you're asking me.
You answer the question.
Because I don't know what you're asking me.
Let's go to the third.
Wait, no. I think a lot. You don't want to define your question, and I don't know why. I don't know what you're asking me. I've already said I don't want Israel to be destroyed. I don't want anyone to be killed. And you've said, does Israel have a right to exist? Does it have my question is, what right are you talking about? Does Britain have a right to exist? Does the United States have a right to exist?
There was a world order built up after 1945 which suggested that aggression should not be condoned into countries, that countries with borders have the right to continue.
I totally agree with that.
Okay.
Which is why the first thing that Israel did within 2 weeks of this war starting, which is supposedly existential for them, was take southern Lebanon, take someone else's country, as they have done repeatedly. And no one even mentions that. And so I guess I would be opposed to that, because I think Lebanon has a right to exist. I thought Gaza had a right to exist. But I noticed that as soon as we start apportioning rights, only one country gets them.
No, I did not say that. You're absolutely putting words into my mouth.
So because I believe, here's what I do believe, since you asked. I believe in universally applicable standards. And if they're not universally applicable, they're not standards, they're preferences. That's why I believe in human rights, not ethnic rights. I don't think Jews have more rights or less rights than anyone else. I don't think Christians have more rights or less rights. Blacks, Filipinos, I believe in human rights that derive from the creation of people by God.
That is what any sane person would believe. But we clearly are not dealing with sane people here. According to Zanny, flattening Gaza is, quote, a disaster for the future of Israel. Imagine someone described the murder of your family as a disaster for the future of the murderer. This is a sickening display of moral inversion that completely exposes how Western media elite devalues brown and Muslim lives. Carlson completely shatters this elite subservience, forcing the focus back onto the tens of thousands of murdered civilians and families. We must be absolutely clear. There are no human rights if they are not universally applied. The establishment invents exceptionalist legal framing to justify collective punishment, illegal land grabs in southern Lebanon, and the bombing of Qatar gas fields, while completely denying the right of self-determination to oppressed populations. We already know that corporate media will always protect the elite and devalue the lives of the ones oppressed by them. But I'm still hopeful because they're losing control on the narrative and they know it. Please subscribe to help our struggle and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.